So, Berto emails, what do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I extract fluoride from water.
So, I see that you have some holiday Psychology in Seattle merch.
Take care of yourself because you deserve it.
It is available now. There should be a promo code that you can get on Instagram. I don't know what that is yet at this point. Stacy will determine that.
It's got cute little snowflakes.
Yeah. And Stacy was working hard on beanies, like stocking caps and trucker hats and other kinds of options. So if you want that, go to our...
Wait, are the trucker hats the ones with little ear flaps?
No.
What are trucker hats?
Trucker hats are the ones with a mesh in the back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anonymous patron, she says, it's hard to say this, but I'm 30 years old and I have slept with every friend I have or have had in the past. I'm 30 years old and I've slept with every friend I have or have had in the past. It feels like I almost pathologically flirt with my friends, even if I'm not attracted to them. I'm bisexual, so I do this with men and women. I don't know why I do this. Do I derive my worth from sexuality? Do I see sex as some kind of bargaining chip to get people to like me? Curious about your opinions. Berto.
Wow, that would take up so much mental bandwidth. That sounds exhausting to me. I will say,
How so? I'm curious. I'm
kind of projecting transactionally. Like if I'm, first of all, I don't think I could retain friendships that easily doing it that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems...
Do most people you've had sex with hate you at this point?
Well, I guess it's more that the people I've had sex with is because I had some form of relationship, even if brief, and now we don't. So if we do stay in contact, it's not like constant contact. So it's not, like an ongoing friendship or some sort. I don't know, but I know that happens, so it's fine. That part's not that unusual. So you're saying
laborious because it would complicate.
But it's if I think every friend, that seems like a lot. Now I will say I've definitely not so much, less and less as I've gotten older, but for a lot of my life, I've been attracted to so many women that in general, the thoughts would have been there, but going through it would still seem like a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So I can already sense that.
But psychologically, why? Because I chose this for you for that reason.
Yeah.
That you might provide some insight into why someone would have these impulses, whether it's healthy or not healthy. So what do you think?
Well, in my case, just in my specific case, I think a lot of the time what would happen is I would want approval from my mother. Mm. And so the idea is, if I can get approval from this female, that is like my mom staying and not leaving. Okay, great. Step one.
But why does sex have to do with it?
Step two, what does approval mean? Oh. Okay, well, approval. Oh, well, when I was little, I was receiving approval from a babysitter in an inappropriate way that involves sexuality. Yeah. And again, obviously this isn't the whole story, but I'm just saying this, I think, played a role. So in my mind, I conflated the two.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
You're abandoned by your mom when you're 4.
3, yeah.
Oh, 3. You end up in New York and you're 5.
Yeah.
And you have an older girl. Yeah. But, I remember when I was 5, my older brother and sister were about the same age as your babysitter, like 12. I saw them as basically adults. Yeah. They were, infinitely more competent and knowledgeable and able and just bigger than me. Yeah. And so I never thought about that you obviously would have transferred a bit onto the babysitter and then...
Yeah, so I think that this weird connection is there where it was like, female that I find... It was actually a combination of things. Because it's not every female. Like there was categories of females that I would categorize as grandmotherly or, maybe aunt-like or...
What do you mean, like friends, or who are you talking about?
No, like older women, right? Oh. So what I'm saying is it wasn't every female. It was females within a certain range. And the range was near my age.
Like when you're an adult.
Yeah, when I was an adult. Near my age, near my age within, I don't know, 10 years or something maybe. And certain types, I liked certain types. And then if it were within those types though, then all those other things would kick in subconsciously. Oh, I need approval. Oh, therefore I need sexual approval. So whether it happened or not, in my mind, there would be obsessive.
Yeah,
I obsess over that.
I think another, you can tell me if this fits, that there's the normal ways to get approval or to get security is to take a long time. Like if, say it's a coworker, right, someone you worked with when you were 25 years old, and this coworker of yours is in your category that you're saying. It could take months and months, years perhaps, before you develop a very in-depth, intimate, close, safe relationship, the one that you might crave as you're trying to repair the trauma from your mom. But a faster way to at least make it seem like you have that relationship is through sex.
Right.
And it does accelerate things in terms of intimacy and closeness and vulnerability, but it isn't necessarily actually being close, right? Yeah. So does that fit?
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it wasn't like I acted on this every time. In fact, most times I didn't. But it definitely dominated a lot of my brain time.
Yeah. What was that like?
Kind of lame, really, like really lame. Because, I'd be in class. I remember in college, the amount of time I spent fantasizing about specific women in my surroundings was kind of all consuming. Like I'd be in a class and I just couldn't even focus on the lecture. And it's just like horrible. It's like just the amount of brain power being devoted to that. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I would do nothing about it. It would just be thoughts swirling around in my head.
Yeah. Did it actually impact your grades at all or your learning at all?
There were, I don't know, because there were other things that impacted that had a bigger, more direct impact. Like the fact is, like I was playing in a band and I had a basically full-time job at the time. And
what job was that? Was it the carpet thing?
Yeah, carpet cleaning and also tutoring at UW.
That's not a euphemism, by the way. So yeah,
I was carpet cleaning.
That's why I asked you. Okay, so to answer your question, anonymous patron, about
which is why I'm saying how it feels like it would take so much energy, because I'm projecting a bit of like how much mental energy even just thinking about that. And that wasn't even with all my friends, it was just like people in my surrounding or something. So yeah.
So when that started to diminish, you felt what?
Well, it wasn't like it started to diminish randomly. I actively started, in fact, one of the things that started happening, I don't know if I told you this, but after our big debate argument in the car that time, slowly.
Yeah, this was perhaps, I mean, strangely not like our most noticeably biggest fight, but the fight that, the only fight we've been in where it was questionable if we would ever be friends again.
Yeah, exactly. And I was so confused from that thing that I think it slowly started drilling a little hole in a part of my brain that I hadn't done. So, and that hole was, well, is there a way you could like tell yourself not to obsess over something? And I think it took, I don't think, I knew it took a long time, but over the years I started doing little exercise moments where I'd be like, just don't like redirect your obsession right now. And I think over years, it's gotten to the point where now I have more, it's like any muscle, really. Like it really is. Like your brain is controllable in that way. Actually, large language models are like this, like where you can influence them by the input that you give them. So brains are. And I can say, if I see an attractive female, I don't have that immediate like overtake my life sort of situation. And I'm able to be like, okay, well, acknowledge, move on, that kind of thing. So that's interesting.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, I think on the podcast, but I don't know if it was this specific that you, at that moment, we were fighting about that. I was essentially providing this other side in that fight that we had 15 years ago. It wasn't 15, it was like 12 years ago. That was perhaps this other side of you that was wondering if it was a good practice or if it was fair to yourself and other people.
Well, and like we talked in our fight episode, the pedantic thing that I was doing was like arguing a point that is still true because it's just the way the brain works. I was literally saying like, well, I can't control what comes into my mind. But I was conflating that with your feelings. That was the biggest input. Like my effect on your feelings and our relation. But also even just the thought of like, is that where my responsibility ends with myself?
Well, I can see also that you could have over time occasionally bumped up against criticism from other people for having that obsession and landed on a defensive justification that kept it going, that made yourself feel better as you were engaging in it.
I don't know, because no one had ever, like honestly, a lot of my male interactions previously were always about obsessive thoughts about females. Like we'd be like talking about like, whoa, look at it, whatever, you know?
Well, one, it's a toxic
and it's
male,
part of the culture.
It's a toxic male thing, meaning that we're taught as men that it's a way of establishing that we're men and that we're straight, and that when you're around other men, you have to engage in the objectification of other women to prove your bona fides. But also, you have close friends who have also been sexually abused, who also have some issues around sex. So, but anyway,
But in either case, I think there were many other things that I had encountered brick walls. This hadn't been one of them. I mean, the walls were all internal and in my actions, but no one that I can remember was like, you need to stop obsessing about.
Well, at the very least, as I am confronting you about this 12 years ago, I am challenging what your subconscious believed to be the road to attachment security, which was, as you described it earlier, and I was telling you that's not a good idea and it's harmful, and to take away that avenue without the insight as to the avenue not actually being an avenue to attachment security would be very threatening. Right.
And of course, neither of us had that knowledge or insight in that moment. Yeah. But that makes a lot of sense, that basically there was a different conversation happening in parallel with our subconsciousness, and mine was going, what are you talking about? Like, you're telling me the world is flat right now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, anonymous patron, I don't know. And in your email is concise, so there's not a lot of detail, which is better, honestly. Some people send very, 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 very long emails that it could literally take me like a few hours to kind of, because, when I'm reading these emails, especially if I'm going to read them on air, I have to fully comprehend, and I do a lot of editing as well. I'll sort of cut things out here and there to make it easier to read online or on the podcast. And so I appreciate it when they're concise, but we don't really know more details. And obviously, even if we did, I wouldn't be able to provide any sort of professional opinion, because you should talk to a therapist about this. But possible avenues of exploration in therapy. So you ask, anonymous patron, do I derive my worth from sexuality? Well, it could be. And certainly if you talk about this in, in public, or, with the common cultural elements, you're going to get people saying that. Well, obviously, if you're having sex with all of your friends, this is something negative. It's something that you're doing out of pathology. You have no self-esteem.
Right.
Maybe even people would slut shame you and say, what's wrong with you? You're gross. But there's nothing in your description that points in that direction. It could be that. I mean, not slut, but it could be that it is deriving from pathology. But I don't know. It could just be the way that you and your friends bond. It sounds like, because for you, Berto, you were talking about how if you were to engage in these kinds of activities, it would cause a lot of conflict. Well, that's because in the typical mainstream American culture, it's really hard to navigate sexual relationships and romantic relationships post breakup. Most people clean break and I'm done with you. And I don't, and even if you are friends with your exes, other people will judge you for it. Like, why are you hanging out with your ex? That's weird. And so, she might live in a subculture of people that it doesn't play out like that, because it doesn't have to play out like that. So I don't know. But the question you want to ask yourself in therapy and explore are, what is your sense of self and how is your self-esteem? If you have a pretty robust sense of self and good enough self-esteem, then that's one thing. Whereas if you aren't really in connection with your needs and have low self-esteem, then it could be related, right? Then you ask, do I see sex as some kind of bargaining chip to get people to like me? And that's another thing to explore. And the questions I would explore is, what happens when people turn you down, or you're not sure if you're going to be able to have sex. You're not sure if you're going to be able to convince someone to have sex with you. Do you feel anxious? Do you avoid people that would not have sex with you? You mentioned that, Anonymous Patron, that some of these people you're not even really attracted to. So what is that? Is it that you just consider sex to be, you're like a bonobo? At least I'm not an expert in this area, but the way people talk about bonobos, our cousins, other primates, is that they use sex for bonding and for soothing each other and for reconnecting.
Yeah.
And it's not considered something that you only do within the couple relationship. They have couples as bonobos, but it's a different kind of intimacy that they have but between them. And so, maybe you're a bonobo, or maybe it is something pathological regarding self-esteem and desperation and insecurity.
Like, I'll say for me, this luckily didn't happen too many times, but there were a few times where I engaged sexually with a person that I wouldn't have found attractive for my style or whatever. And the reason I did was, in my opinion, because of that leftover trauma of, I need to please via sex because this is my abuser, even though they weren't abusing me in that case. It wasn't their fault or anything. But in my mind, something like clicks over to like, you don't need to enjoy this. This is not about your enjoyment. You just need to please this person.
Meaning
me as in Berto.
You're speaking to yourself.
Yeah.
You're saying
Berto doesn't need to enjoy this.
Yeah.
You just need to please this person.
Right.
And in fact, I would derive zero sexual gratification from it. Like, I would not get erect at all. But in my mind, the surface level of my mind, this is cool. This is happening. But then even just 1 millimeter under that, it's like, I don't like this. I don't want to be doing this. And it's the weirdest thing. And like I said, this didn't happen. I wasn't like addicted to this behavior, but it happened a few times.
Well,
where it was like,
addiction isn't the word I would use.
Yeah.
It's a compulsion that we all have towards safety.
Yeah.
That's what you needed to do in your coercive, sexual, abusive relationship with your babysitter. The way to safety was to comply to put yourself aside.
And yet, I put myself in these. The difference is, I was putting myself in these situations. Like, no one was forcing me anymore.
Yeah.
And yet, a weird part of my brain was going, but you should do this. But you're not going to enjoy it, and that's fine, because you're irrelevant in this story.
Yeah, and it points to a larger psychological principle that you say it felt like the right thing to do. If you were to describe it, you'd say like, yeah, that was awesome. I got together with that person. Or, hey, I'm just a horny guy and she's horny too. So we just got...
But only in the moment.
We got horny with each other.
But only in the moment, because afterwards, even the surface level was like, that sucked.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I never retroactively was like, that was fine. Every single one, and again, it's probably in one hand the number of times, but not that. But basically, it was like, that sucked. Why? Why would I do that? Like, that's so dumb.
Yeah. Well, in the moment,
so risky too.
In the moment, we are animals with squishy goo between our ears, and we are simple creatures that are motivated to move towards quote unquote good and away from bad. And we don't know why we're saying that's good. We just know it's good. So we're just going there.
Yeah. So totally in the moment, that surface level is going like, yeah, great. This is what we want.
Yeah. Like eating Cheetos or something. All right, let's take a break. What do you say?
Let's do it.
So Berto, we just saw Killers of the Flower Moon. What'd you think?
Oh my gosh, man. First of all, I didn't know anything about the history.
Right.
Of course, granted, even just the fact that I knew that it was about Native Americans, I was sure that there was going to be some horrible stuff. But yeah, no. So I was kind of concerned because it was a very long movie. It was 3 hours and 40 minutes or something. And so going in, I was like, ugh. And we didn't go to it that late, but it was like 7. So it was going to be a thing. And yet I didn't feel it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was into it the whole time, and I almost could have kept going because I almost wanted more of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
I also just cinematography. I'm not like a great, I noticed that scene, but just compared to like an average movie I'd watch, it just blew me away. Like the visuals, the audio. It's clear he's like been doing this for 100 years.
Totally. But like the difference between Power of the Dog and this movie, this movie has an excellent script and someone behind the camera who knows how to tell a story.
Right.
And a good script is the foundation of any movie. You can have fantastic cinematography and directing and acting, but if you don't have a script,
the storytelling was so good. Like the pace of it. And I saw a little vignette on YouTube about how they actually had a different script at some point where Leo was going to play a detective, and it was going to be more focused on like the detectives and stuff like that. And they luckily scrapped that and were like, no, let's really focus on this. And I love the focus on their relationship and kind of seeing how is this that tragedy of like, wow, like that could have actually been a nice relationship if he hadn't been such a horrible thug of a person.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, the Killers of Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese, it's a true story about these Native Americans, American Indians who lived in, is it Oklahoma, I believe?
Yeah, in Oklahoma.
And of course, they had already been displaced and mistreated for centuries, decades.
Right. They even they even mentioned, like at one point in the movie, they said, this is worse than, and they mentioned like 2 other places that already had to leave because it was so horrible.
And because the laws and the sentiment around displacing indigenous people was starting to improve and be more fair, a little bit more fair, eventually the federal government allotted this land to these people.
Yeah.
And we don't know what was in their mind, the government, but it seems that they were allotting land that they didn't think anybody would want.
Right.
And oops. And then it was discovered that they were sitting on this huge oil reserve, and these people became, according to statistics that I saw, the most richest people on the planet.
That's crazy.
Per capita, the most money per capita. And then, of course, the white people descended, and very, very horrible things happened. And the movie focuses on one horrible white man and
his goons,
and one of his goons being Leonardo DiCaprio. Robert De Niro, I was wondering after I saw him in some bad movies in the last 5-10 years that maybe he had lost it, or then I started wondering, did he ever have it? I don't know. And then you see him in this, and it's so convincing. I mean, we're looking at Robert De Niro, Leo DiCaprio, and within 5 minutes, I'm sold on the characters.
Oh, totally.
And then, of course, the actress that plays Molly, the Native American woman, just brilliantly acted. So what emotions did you feel walking out?
Okay, so the first part of it was, I got very excited because, like you said, as soon as they introduced us to Leo and then De Niro's characters, it's just so great. I love watching Leonardo, and immediately I'm thinking, wow, he's just already playing a different character than other ones I've seen him do. And it's kind of like this kind of more brutish, not smart character, but also he's got these weird like idealistic spurts to it. And then he meets De Niro, and De Niro, immediately I get this kind of foreboding feeling, but he plays that kind of like, I'll bring you under my wing and everything's great. And so I'm intrigued. I'm excited. Now I knew it was probably going to go horribly, but I didn't know just how horribly.
So that's interesting. At the beginning of the movie, because it takes a while before it really settles in, maybe a couple hours.
Right.
As it's building up, what were you thinking it was headed towards? Because I can't imagine you even thinking how bad it actually got.
I did not anticipate, because again, I had no idea about the story. Like, here's what I thought was going to happen. In
fact, just side note, it's worse than the movie depicts, because they focus on a particular small group of people. But it was a whole bunch. It was way worse than the movie even depicts, and the movie is horrible to watch. It's a wonderful movie, but it's very difficult to watch.
What I thought the movie was going to be about, like what I thought was going to happen, is that De Niro's character is sort of trying to take the lands away, and I thought Leonardo is going to step up and try to, and actually at first, basically Dances with Wolves sort of situation, but not that
white
extreme.
savior.
But I knew, actually I had heard something about how the female actress is really powerful in this movie. So I knew that they were going to probably not make him like the hero, but I did think he was going to kind of become an activist, like be converted. And I thought that was going to be the big thing. Like there was going to be a big, I drink your milkshake moment.
Well, it just so happens in real life, that doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
Greed wins.
Yeah.
And the oppressed always lose.
So depressingly, as the movie went on, first of all, when they start showing, even early on, they start showing these scenes of these dead Native Americans, and they say, murder never investigated, death never investigated. And I'm already going, oh no, because then I'm realizing it's not that they're going to be like finagling the lands away. I'm thinking, are they just killing them for the lands?
Yeah.
But then I didn't even think, because I was thinking, okay, like they kill and they kind of move into the... No. It was so much more nefarious than that.
Yeah.
They're going to marry them, get the rights transferred, like through the, whatever they call it, and then kill them in a, quote, untraceable way, which is totally not untraceable. I just kept going, like as the movie kept going, I got angrier and angrier and more depressed.
You were audibly making noises.
Oh yeah, dude.
Throughout the movie. You're sitting next to me and you're just going,
yeah, dude, it was bad. It was bad. And because I don't know, just everything that's going on in the world right now, and I'm just sitting there watching like the worst of humans. Just like why? It's just so sad. And I'm thinking, at which point, me naively, at which point does Leo's character start turning around, and it doesn't come.
Yeah. And the way in which the writer and Scorsese and the actors depicted the story, it was devoid of any of the cheesy tropes that you will see in 99% of movies and TV shows these days. Like, I kept waiting for a scene. So, for those who don't know, haven't seen the movie or don't know the history, earlier I was saying they had all this money from oil, but because of the way the laws worked and the customs worked, the Native Americans weren't in charge of their money.
I know. They had to have a white person that controlled their finances.
Yeah. And the Native Americans who owned the land, who had been displaced, who had earned the money, they couldn't write their own checks. They had to go to a white guy and ask them and justify expenses before them. And as we're seeing these scenes periodically where the Native Americans are going to the white guy, there's a number of these white guys that they have to go to. I kept waiting for a scene that would happen absolutely if it was written and directed by someone else, where Molly stands up and says, I'm not going to take this shit. I can't believe that I have to ask you, or somehow Molly...
She outsmarts them.
Yeah, somehow she outsmarts them.
Which is the same thing I was expecting. Spoiler alert. I was expecting the same kind of thing. I mean, I say expecting in quotes because like I actually know who's directing stuff, but I was thinking, all right, at some point, Molly is going to figure out that the injections actually contain this other thing, and she's going to trick him, and she's going to pretend she took the injection. Here, I'll do it myself, and she's not going to take it
because
again, she's going to start getting better.
That's not how things work. She was in love with him, and of course, it's fictionalized to some extent because they don't have this micro detail, but it's much more likely the way that it happened in the movie than it was in real. It's very likely that what was depicted in the movie, it happened that way.
Well, I read something. I don't know if this was quite right, but I read that what was actually happening is that they were adding something to her drinks, and she got further poisoned over time. Okay. Same thing, still poisoned.
Yeah,
but it may or may not have been injections. But whatever.
Okay. There were so many moments where in another production, they would have written in a scene where Robert De Niro's character gets his just desserts or something, where Molly slaps him across the face. But for the people who are oppressed, they live in a system that oppresses them from all directions. They can't just stand up and give the bird to the white guy who is monitoring their money, because there will be consequences. And so often in these historical fiction or depictions of history, they will insert our current expectations or hopes for the characters, to redeem themselves or something. Yeah. And it always pulls me out. I'm like, oh, there it is. There's that scene. You just ruined it for me. It doesn't feel as immersive. This movie feels very immersive because they never give that satisfaction. It's like a Game of Thrones episode,
Yeah, exactly.
It just gets worse and worse because that's the way the world works.
Right.
There was no scene with these folks in Oklahoma, the Native Americans, where they won. Now, eventually down the line, but there was a long stretch of time.
Victory, because even the main bad guy in this movie, he didn't serve a life sentence,
right?
Let alone get the executioner. He was released. He died as an old man,
right. Yeah, for the people who committed these horrific crimes, and it was dozens of people and a conspiracy and psychopathic on the highest level, because he was framing himself as their best friend, their white savior, and at the same time he's routinely executing them. He barely spends any time in prison after it's demonstrated that he did it. After it wasn't like a questionable trial; it was clear there were they turned a bunch of the hitmen to testify against him, and including the Leo character.
That's another thing that made this movie, as you say, immersive, very believable for me, was that, first of all, the what's the name of the William, right? Or Bill, right? He's the main bad guy?
I forget.
Okay. He never has that mask off moment. There is no mask. It's basically, even when he's in jail, he's sitting there he's still himself. He's genuinely sad that Leo's baby dies.
Or is he?
Well, no, I think he is. I think because it's kind of like when you watch the mobsters in real life, like gangsters in the Sicilian mafia or whatever, they legitimately care about their kids. They're not like, well, if my kid dies, I'm a mobster, I don't care. That's not reality.
Right.
And they actually sort of care for their friends and family until one of them crosses them or something. And this guy's similar. It's like, well, but granted, he's not gushing oh, I've made mistakes. This is all because I couldn't even, if I hadn't, no, nothing like that. It's just, that's horrible. Let's pray. Right. And he never sits there going rethinking his actions. He's just I did what I need to. In his mind, he is their friend because he's thinking, well, listen, these people's time is over. He says that, right? This people's time is over. What are they going to do? They don't even know what to do with their thing. This is actually the best thing we can do for them.
Well, right. So in his heart, when he lays down at night and it's just him and God, and he is talking to God or himself or something, do you think he thinks he's doing the right thing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Because, first of all, he is fundamentally racist, whether he would call himself that or not. Fundamentally racist. And in that racism, he doesn't see them the same way.
Well, also...
Doesn't see them as equals at all.
I don't think they really portrayed this very effectively. And maybe it wasn't actually a thing, but Native Americans, indigenous people in the United States, because of the genocide and the displacement and the ripping people away from each other, children away from parents, and the death of just a lot of Native Americans over the centuries due to infections from viruses that they were not accustomed to as a people. There was just a lot of grief, a lot of loss, and a lot of trauma, transgenerational trauma of the highest order, really. And there was a lot of alcoholism and a lot of emotional issues, a lot of what we might call mental health issues today, a lot of attachment issues, probably a fair amount of violence and suicide. And they didn't pull any punches there as well.
No.
Another director would have been pressured by production to take that one character out because it wasn't really necessary. There was a guy, Native American guy, who struggled from alcoholism. Now, he was a victim in the end, and it's not ambiguous that he wasn't a victim, but they didn't portray him in a very flattering light.
He was an alcoholic and suicidal, like both.
Yeah, right. And so and they didn't really provide any explanation, right? Which another production would. They would say, well, here's why he's suicidal, or they just would have excised the character altogether.
Similarly, how everyone was sort of taking it at face value that these people were all getting sick and dying young. And
that's my point, is that it was actually happening.
Like
Naturally, a lot of people were dying from a variety of issues.
Right.
And because of the systemic oppression, because of the transgenerational trauma, because of the displacement and the economic problems.
So he even mentions it to DiCaprio's character. He says, listen, she's not going to be around too long.
Like, but they didn't really explain that very well because that, and that happens today where, you'll hear people talk about like black fathers or something. They'll be like, well, black fathers, they don't stick around
absentee
their kids.
fathers.
Right. And statistically, there is a higher rate of black fathers.
And that's where the story ends.
Yeah, without taking into consideration the fact that it's white people's fucking fault. And it's still their fault today, And so this justification that perpetuates the oppression that the Robert De Niro character is just like, well, he doesn't know that he's part of the problem, and he's like, look what they suffer from, and so it doesn't really matter if we kill them because they're gonna die soon anyway.
And we're actually helping them. We're giving them the insulin they need.
Right, and then the perpetuation of the trauma. And then future generations feel justified to dehumanize and harm this group of people because of the effects of what white people have done to them,
And I feel like there's a couple characters, like De Niro, certainly, I mean, psychopathic tendencies, it seems, because he was like, a career criminal. He was defrauding people left and right, pulling all sorts of insurance scams, taking out a policy on a dude, then having him killed.
Yeah.
Like, it's all over the place.
Yeah. And that's interesting. I didn't know that part of the story. I just knew the broad strokes. And if that's true and indicative and a pattern, then he's clearly a psychopath.
Like burning his own fields. Like, the fire. Ooh, who knows?
Yeah, because that's what psychopaths do.
Yeah.
They are constantly, was that guy hurting for money? No. But I think he was naturally rich as a rancher to begin with.
Right.
So why would you do this unless you just woke up in the morning and said, I can't wait to overpower and dominate and harm and exploit others. That is my mission in life. Including doing all the petty theft kind of stuff like insurance and burning the fields.
Because it seems to me like DiCaprio's character was more of certainly antisocial dude, but horrible antisocial, and a murderer. I shouldn't. But he was.
So you're saying that another guy in his shoes with a similar IQ, but a different personality trait of empathy and remorse would not have done what he did?
What DiCaprio did?
Yeah.
In fact, the other husband, the one that got blown up, he was not doing that.
Right.
And, they seemed fairly close in social alignment.
Maybe
he was slightly more educated.
It's interesting. Yeah. I you're pointing that out, and I wonder if that was specifically written into the script, because that tension between those two white husbands was very clear. Yeah. And maybe that was the point of just like, the writer is saying, I'm saying there's something different about this guy. You know, he's not just a nice, stupid dude. There's something about him that allowed him to go there,
And but again, I think he is nowhere near on the spectrum, anyways, as the De Niro character, because, for example, he felt sort of ambivalence and some remorse. Like he was kind of horrified when he actually saw the effects of the explosion. He was considering not giving her the poison, and he sort of used the poison on himself a bit.
Right.
He almost he first decided to testify against them, then he came back, and then he ultimately did. Right. He almost came clean to her.
You could argue that he testified against him because he felt threatened on some level.
Right. But that's my point. It's like he was certainly, on the spectrum of criminality, very far over. He was a murderer, all these things.
But I don't know. So my answer to that question is that I don't know. I could see a lot of people in his shoes, regardless of IQ, going down that road, because the length of time, the movie's long, but the span of time was much longer. It was years and years, you know? And they kind of depict that because children are born, or throughout the movie. And because in the beginning, he is desperate for money, and think about the times. This is around the Great Depression, or is it before the Great Depression?
It's before.
Was it in the? It was just before. But still, there's not a lot of opportunity for people. He just came back from the war, and he travels to meet up with his uncle, and his uncle gives him a job. And in the beginning, Leo in the beginning of the movie, he is not trying to. At least the way they wrote the character, he's not trying to harm anyone. He's just trying to make a buck. He's just trying to make a living.
Yes, but he's already. I mean, this is. I guess we're not making that different of points. Actually, what I'm trying to say is that if I were to compare the De Niro personality to the DiCaprio personality of the characters, the De Niro is just, he doesn't care. He probably literally feels nothing for these people.
I also think he wakes up in the morning and wants to, because there's no reason for him to.
Whereas that DiCaprio, and I think this is what you're getting at, DiCaprio starts sort of normalish. If I were drawing it on a spectrum, I would say yes, but it seems like he was already, like he was more comfortable with pulling crimes already from the start. Like, almost from the start, he starts pulling little heists and things. He's not murdering people yet, but, and he's, beating things up or whatever.
I just think it's really hard when you are in a system that has everything pushing you and enticing you and incentivizing you going down a road. Think about like a gang member in inner city United States, someone who is developmentally, personality trait wise, just run of the mill within normal limits regarding empathy and compassion, not a psychopath. And you are terrified of walking home from school. You're not in a gang, and you get beat up regularly. You get jacked regularly for your shoes and your bag and whatever. And your cousin down the street has a gang, an older group of guys. You go to them, and you're distraught. You have a black eye, and you're just like, I don't know. You're terrified, and your parents say things like, "Well, call the cops," or I don't know, whatever. Parents are helpless in that situation too. And you go to your cousin, and your cousin's like, well, I can help you, but it's going to cost you. You're going to have to do something. Right. Well, what do you mean? Well, you're going to have to hold up this 7-Eleven and get some money, and then we'll take care of those guys. And then here's a fake gun. You're not going to shoot anyone. Just you do that. And you do it, and suddenly your life is completely improved. You can walk home from school because you have the gang endorsement behind you, and no one screws with you. But, escalation of crime, escalation of desperation, indoctrination into a way of thinking. A couple years later, he's a cold-hearted killer with a track record of doing psychopathic antisocial things. Not necessarily, I'm not saying they all do that. I treated a lot of gang members. But my point is that for Leo's character, it was a very similar progression. There wasn't really a threat from the outside, but you could argue that there was the threat of economic.
I'm totally not disagreeing that people can slide into worse and worse patterns, but even there, different people have different thresholds that they just won't cross. Even if they're, whatever. So I think, in my opinion, if DiCaprio was in different cities, not exposed to this dude, not DiCaprio, his character, to be clear, I think he still would have been at least a petty criminal. He probably wouldn't have murdered his wife.
But I don't know if he would have generated the ideas of petty crime himself. We don't know that. We don't know that.
Maybe or maybe not. But I'm thinking I wouldn't have been surprised. Let's say, based on, I'm just using the evidence from what I saw in the movie, I wouldn't have been surprised if you would have extracted him, put him in a different city, and then we saw, hey, what did he end up doing? He was a low-laid criminal. Now, but whereas I would be surprised if in any city, in any place of the world, the De Niro personality of his character would have been anything but a psychopath.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, dear audience, I think both of them, including Leo's character, the man that this is based on in real life, should have, if the death penalty was on.
Right. I mean, he was poisoning her.
Yeah.
And he murdered people.
Murdered whole sorts, premeditated, planned, and there were plenty of opportunities for the man that Leo played to go to the authorities or just move away or something. He didn't have to stay. He could have taken Molly away, or there's all sorts of things he could have done. And I think that there's a very hot corner of hell for these two people.
The other example is, so that other thug that was testifying, and the one that was trying to take an insurance policy on his kids to then have him die and whatever. That guy, in my mind, was all the way on the psychopath spectrum. Right. He didn't care.
Right.
He got sadistic enjoyment.
All right, let's take a break. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. Let's do an OPP, Berto.
OPP.
These people became patrons all the way back in 2021, which is almost 3 years ago. We have
That's crazy.
The following people who are all regular patrons. We have Katie from Illinois. We have William from North Carolina. Rick from Oslo, Norway. Hannah from Oxford, Great Britain. Guro from Norway. Hannah from Portland, Oregon. Andrew from Portland, Oregon. Priscilla from San Jose, California. Another Hannah from Seattle. Is that three Hannahs? Nice. Hannah from Oxford, Hannah from Portland, and Hannah from Seattle. Emma from Ontario. Ams from Great Britain. Bailey from Tulsa, Oklahoma, speaking of. David from California. Ola from Poland. Maher from HR, Zagreb. That's Hungary, right?
Yeah.
And James from God Knows Where and Jennifer from God Knows Where. Thank you for being a patron and staying a patron.
Thank you for being a patron.
For so long. My wallet is that TV show, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Holly from New York, she says, after listening to your episode about incels, I went back to listen to the Elliot Rodger episode. Do you remember Elliot Rodger?
Oh, yeah.
So can you give a quick summary of Elliot Rodger?
A person who was disaffected by women heavily.
Well, he thought he was.
But yeah, he considered himself he considered women to be all the bad adjectives and things. And then one time went on a massacre spree to take his revenge, basically.
Yeah.
And then he sadly became the poster boy for a lot of these incel communities.
Right. Because he had a manifesto and he spoke and acted in a way that was in line with a lot of these incels.
Yeah.
So Holly is saying, after listening to your episode on incels, I went back, listened to the Elliot Rodger episode. And by the way, that Elliot Rodger episode I made almost 10 years ago, I'm thinking. And it was one of the first episodes where I did a full deep dive.
Yeah, I remember that was a big thing you did, yeah.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time, and it was a really long episode. And it ended up garnering a fair amount of attention even back then, which was surprising to me. Because, you do a lot of episodes, you just you don't think any episode's going to be particularly interesting to folks. But people still listen to that episode because Elliot Rodgers' legacy lives on,
Yeah.
Anyway, Holly says, I have been involuntarily celibate for a long time. So for those who don't know, that's what incels stand for, involuntarily celibate, meaning that what do they mean by involuntarily celibate?
I don't know what this writer, is this a patron? I don't know what the writer means in this case, but in general, in that community, it means, hey, listen, I tried. There's just no going anywhere with these women. Like, you try to be nice, you're too nice. You try to be a jerk, you're a jerk. You, etc. And like, basically, there's no winning with them. I've tried everything. They have impossible standards for how a guy should look and all these things. So unless you're, a rich model who's an asshole but really nice on the surface, they won't even look at you. So I've tried, and since I failed, I'm involuntarily being celibate. I can't have sex with them.
Right, and in the most strictest sense, if you just look at the verbatim, it means that you are not having sex and probably won't have sex because of something outside of your own volition.
That's right.
It's not a choice you're making. You're trying to have sex, but for whatever reason, there's a barrier and you're not having sex. But for incels, that's the way that, the way you described it, Berto, is the way that they narrativize it. It's not that there's something wrong with them,
right? or the approach,
or it just takes time, or they've only tried to have sex with people while they were at a club or something, like, hey, would you have sex with me? There's no taking responsibility or self-reflection or whatever, or no looking at other kinds of factors. It's always like, well, it's women and feminism. That's what's ruining this situation.
Well, and I'd go further, that even in cases, I absolutely can imagine cases where maybe the person is, and I'm not talking about a member of this community. I'm just saying, like, I'm sure there are sadly millions of people who, through no fault of their own, are not able to get with someone that would be with them. And that's very sad. The problem for me starts in what are we going to do about it?
Right. Yeah. So what Holly is saying is, well, I've been involuntarily celibate for a long time. A long time is capitalized. But I don't hate men or go shoot people like Elliot Rodger. So I was sitting at a bar with a friend. We were in deep conversation. And these guys came up to us and interrupted us and tried to have a conversation with us. Listening to your episode on Elliot Rodger, you talk how he threw coffee on the girls at the bus stop. So just chiming in here, Elliot Rodger, there's this story that he tells, I think in his manifesto or maybe in one of his videos, because that was another part of why he was famous, is that he was one of the first mass killers that had a video precursor presence. He had recorded videos and had already uploaded them and was conscious of the fact that after he dies, people might be watching his videos. And, like I think he killed his roommates, the 3 Asian students. Oof. They were from abroad. They came to California to go to college, and he was rooming with them, and he murdered all of them. And then I think the story is he went outside, got in his car, and on his laptop, that's when he uploaded the manifesto, because it's very clear that he is going to, or he did kill people in the manifesto. He waited until the last minute to upload it. And he was, probably thinking, well, I'm going to die today, But anyway, so he, but before that, he tells a story about how he was, I think, driving or walking, and he saw, in his words, 2 hot blonde girls waiting at a bus stop. And he said that he flashed a smile at them. and they ignored him, according to him. I mean, God knows. Maybe they didn't see him. Maybe they smiled back, or they're like...
Or they ignored him.
Or they're just like, who is that? Do I know that guy? What's going on? And then he says, quote, "In a rage, I made a U-turn." Okay, so he was driving. So just imagine that he's driving by a bus stop in his car, and he was in love with his car. I think he had a Beamer or something, and he just thought he was hot shit in this stupid ass Beamer. Anyway, he says, "In a rage, I made a U-turn, pulled up to their bus stop, and splashed my Starbucks latte all over them. I felt a feeling of spiteful satisfaction as I saw it stain their jeans," unquote. So he tells a story, and Holly is referring to it because what she experienced was that she will get shot down a lot, or come up empty when she's on the town looking for some action, and she doesn't pull a U-turn and throw coffee in people's faces or kill people.
Which was my point just now, which is, I will even grant, like maybe they might have even stuck their tongue out at him. They might have said, "Ugh, gross, horrible." Yeah, maybe they're rude people. It's what comes next that we have to not do.
So Holly goes, "I started to realize it must be the misogynistic society that drives these actions. In both the stories, the men were not encouraged to engage in any way." So meaning that the guy who came up to her and her friend when they were out, and also Elliot Rodger with the bus stop. So she's saying in both stories, the men were not encouraged to engage in any way, but somehow felt entitled to do so. What's going on here, Berto?
Yeah, well, certainly that's true. One thing is this, like, guys are definitely less in demand when it comes to the average random dating scene. Obviously, in reality, there's about equal numbers of males and females, so there's mostly enough to go around for people to find people that they can be with. But it's hard. But on the average random dating scene, especially online, guys are at a disadvantage.
Like women, at a meat market club or
a dating site,
or on Tinder. Or
something. Like if you go on there, the guys are like a dime a dozen, and the women are getting to be very picky about it and stuff like that.
I wonder if it's still that way, though. I know it was in the beginning.
I mean, I'd imagine so, because. But anyways,
I think it's more likely that men will DM.
Yeah.
They're quicker perhaps to reach out, but I wonder if it's equalizing, because I think in the past, like 15 years ago, like with Match.com, I wonder, and I'm just speculating, that men were much more likely to sign up on something like that because there's less barriers to entry for them, meaning that there's a lot less
it could be, but
risk for them.
There's a reason why there's ladies getting free nights, right? Like it's
totally.
It's
but
just
again, it's a question, because it's, as you said, in reality, in terms of the gender distribution, there's no higher amount of one gender proportion-wise that wants to have romance and sex.
But there are a lot of barriers. Like if I were a woman, I would have to be more protective about my sexuality.
That's what I'm saying. So your meat markets and your online dating, there's the risks
are super high.
Yeah, for women.
For everything, including getting pregnant. Which, by the way, when a guy gets someone pregnant, if they're an asshole, there's a lot of steps they can take to not have to deal with it as much.
Right.
Even if they have to pay alimony, like they might say, but a woman gets pregnant. Well, that's a deal.
But even foregoing that, being assaulted and raped and harmed and exploited.
So my point with all that is that, like, I think that imbalance is there. And so I think percentage-wise, you have a lot more, like if you're drawing the low bell curve, I'm sure there are women out there that if they get turned down will be really horrible about it. But there's just less of that. And whereas there's a lot more guys trying and failing, and out of those, a slim percentage are psychopaths. And those end up throwing coffee on people. Because like, what, is Elliot's the first one that smiled at someone and didn't get a... No, that happens all the time. And same for women, right? But it's just, what I'm thinking is that in this case, he is part of a long tail of dudes that, and in his case, he's a psychopath. And so he takes a psychopathic action as a result.
Well, I'm trying to remember what I diagnosed him with. I didn't diagnose him, but what I speculated about in that episode. But yeah, what I'll say is that it's hard to say in the specific instances that you experience. You know, the guy that walked up to you in the bar when you weren't giving any signals that you wanted to talk to anybody, you know, who knows what was going through his mind? It really could be anything. But in terms of the overall statistics and the much higher prevalence of the Elliot Rodgers versus, I mean, do we even have a female version of an Elliot Rodger? I mean, not that I know of.
The one question I do have is, do we know what happened? So the guys approached her and her friend at the bar.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
In the longer email, I think she just said that she was annoyed, her and her friend were annoyed, and maybe entertained a little bit of a conversation, but eventually got out of it or something.
I guess the one thing I will say is if you're trying to have sex, maybe if someone approaches you to have a conversation, that might be an entry point.
Well, priorities, you know, if you're having a deep conversation with your friend.
Oh, no, totally. I'm just saying, like, and I'm not saying this person categorized it this way, but if I had a friend who was an incel, a guy who was an incel and was moaning, and we're talking at a bar about it, and he's like, oh my gosh, you just never get laid. And two women come over and start talking to us, and he's like, get the hell out of here. I'm like, dude, well, no wonder you're never getting laid.
Well, yeah, but the gender might not exactly port over. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Okay.
Port over.
In that for Holly to have this frequent occurrence of men just barging in, you might use that as a deal breaker of like, well, if I'm up for it and I'm giving you signals or something, then great. But we're just having a conversation. You think it's okay just to nose your way in? Like what sort of person are you? You know, who knows what sort of person that is. But anyway, my answer to this is that men are taught in explicit and implicit ways that women were put on this earth for our pleasure. It sounds like a very extreme sentence to say out loud, but it's the evidence of this is everywhere. It's getting better, but when we were kids, it was pretty overt, the way in which women were talked about. I was talking with someone else, maybe Rebecca, about how I remember my mom referring to herself and being referred to as Mrs. Allen Honda, you know, Mrs. my dad's name.
Right.
Not only does she lose her last name, but she also loses her first name. Letters would be addressed to her, Mrs. Allen Honda.
So disgusting.
The message, and that's just a manifestation of the attitude, which is just like women are lower than children. At least children get their own first name.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't call me child of Allen Honda. They called me Kirk Honda.
Yeah.
And so women and wives are particularly dehumanized and objectified and made to feel like property. And also, they're just there for men to look at and enjoy and have sex with and make them dinner and all that kind of stuff. So that's one message that is still pretty strong. Also, women, we're taught as men that women don't have any agency. Women weren't depicted in movies as having agency. You know, I was watching this movie that I really loved at the time and still kind of like it with, oh my God, Tommy Boy, what's his name?
Chris Farley.
Chris Farley. He was in a movie about being a ninja.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember this movie? Yeah, and as a Japanese person,
in a white ninja outfit or something.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
I think he's raised by Japanese ninjas or something, and he grows up in Japan and travels to the United States to work on some sort of caper or something. And hijinks ensue, and he meets this woman, and the woman has more intelligence than he does, because, you know, the Chris Farley character is kind of a bumbling fool. And in the beginning, she seemingly does have a little bit of agency, but by the end, it's the happy ending. Chris Farley wins the day. He saves the girl. He, gets the bad guy. And in the final scene, her outfit is completely different. Her demeanor is completely different. Her acting is completely different. In the complete direction of she is just there as a prop to make him look like he succeeded. Not only did he get the bad guy, not only does his dad approve of him, but he has this silent, pretty, fawning after him trophy of a woman on his side that doesn't say anything. Her agency is gone. And that wasn't that long ago. That was like in the 90s. So these are strong messages. Women have no agency. They don't have goals. They don't have personalities really. They're just there for our pleasure. Also, another message that's important to internalize for us is that real men, it's told to us that real men don't care about consent. And this is something that, of course, I'm not the first to say this, but it's well understood that in order to be a real man, of course, they would never say this in sex ed in school or something, right? There's not like a after-school special about giving the message to young boys that they're not supposed to, that if they want to be a real man, then they don't care about consent from it. But the messages are throughout, and it's getting better as time goes on. I don't know if that's just my circle or something, but there were pretty strong messages around like, well, if she's available, if she's drunk, if she's passed out, if she's sleeping, if she's, by implication, right? The implication being on a boat, it not only does that not matter consent, but if you want to be a real man, only gay people and women care about consent, like you got to go in there and get that piece of ass. If and other men would judge you if you pushed back. Anyway, point is that there's a lot of message around that. Also, as a man, we are taught that all women want us. Do you know this message?
No, I got the opposite message.
Well, I think that, maybe it's sort of nuanced or modified depending, but I find that there's a lot of dudes who think that like they can get with anybody if they just had the right angle.
Oh yeah, well, no, certainly I got that from media and movies, which is that,
like Chris Farley and this woman.
The story goes, you're definitely not going to get the girl at first. You just can't. But if you work hard enough at it and pull just the right stunts, you'll get the girl.
Right.
That was definitely the message.
Right.
Yeah, but that first part is important because the reason this resonated with a lot of dudes, probably still does, is because it's in fact, especially as you're first coming up as a teenager and stuff, it's not obvious how you actually get a girlfriend and what do you do and like right. and then it's intimidating. And what if I say and they say no? It's scary. Mm-hmm. And so the message in the movies kind of helps you feel better. You're like, oh no, they are gonna say no, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. You just gotta come up with a big enough thing, like hold a boombox over a car while you're driving the car down a cliff, and then
Yeah. So another message is that if a woman dressed in a quote unquote attractive manner, or whatever that is, then she doesn't deserve boundaries. In fact, she might even it might just be open, what do you say? Open season, thank you, to harm her or grab her or touch her. I mean, we understand that other societies have different versions of this, message that is given to men. You see these videos of women in India, for example, or other countries that I'm not remembering right now, where you have like journalists, women who are, or just local girls who are just caught in a crowd of men.
It's terrorizing. It's basically that person is being mobbed by the mob, and they feel entitled to do whatever.
And there are people filming it.
Yeah.
And the dudes know people are filming it.
Yeah. And no one's caring or doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hundreds of dudes.
So this is something that happened to a reporter who is now sadly, I don't know if it's because of this, but sadly a extreme right-wing conspiracy nut loon. But her name is Lara Logan, and she was, I thought, a really great wartime reporter during the Iraq War. Maybe
was she the one that got attacked in Benghazi?
Yes, yeah. She was mobbed and
which is also caught on
sexually attacked, basically. And that could leave you scarred for the rest of your life, of course. It's horrible. It's horrific. Yeah.
Right. And in the United States, we have a version of that. So those men, they're not born that way.
No.
They're told things repeatedly at home, on TV, in church. It's rampant that there are certain messages of dehumanization of women, and also that if a woman does X, Y, and Z, then all bets are off, open season, go to town. It's no big deal.
Well, the framing is basically, I don't know in all cases, but in some of these cases, the framing is, well, you're definitely not supposed to commit adultery or have sex outside of marriage. You're barely even supposed to have sex in marriage. But women don't matter. And you need to be on the lookout. And if you need to punish women, punish women. And then that translates to, okay, well, we can do whatever we want.
Well, and I don't know if it's a factor in these news reports and these videos that I've seen, but when we did the IBLP deep dive, when you take a group of people and you berate them into hating their own sexuality and their own body and their own impulses and their own emotions, then some pretty wacky things are going to happen to those individuals once they're adults and free to act on their own free will.
Yeah.
To the point where you might have some people that have some pretty disturbing ideas of sex and of themselves and of women's bodies and of entitlement, and also a huge bursting well of desire that has been constantly repressed, because I don't know if this is the case, but in a lot of these societies, their marriages are arranged.
Yeah.
And you could imagine a young man or a teen boy who is being told that he is bad for having sexual impulses and the sex is only supposed to be in marriage and da-da-da. Of course, there's that turmoil and struggle and conflict that's imposed from the outside unhealthily. And then they're matched up with someone at the age of 16, and let's say they don't have attraction to that person.
Yeah.
And they don't really necessarily even get along with them. And more repression happens, right? More lack of being in line with your body and who you are and your desire, lack of getting to know yourself, more self-hatred, more confusion, more judgment from the outside. And then a reporter comes along dressed in what you would say in a very slutty way, but she just has jeans and a t-shirt on. And let's just say that a volcano of confusion and aggression and anger
literally explodes.
Yeah.
So I will say, another perspective here, though, is that having been a male in a bar, gathering the courage to approach a woman and open a conversation, it's hard. And honestly, out of a lot of my friends, I was the one that would most often be able to even do it. And that's only because I'm, a narcissist performer by trade. And so I don't know, it's something in my brain be like, just do it. Just go freaking make a fool out of yourself. And oftentimes it would not go well, but I never threw coffee on anyone. I'd just be like, all right, well, that one didn't work. Let's try a different one. The thing is, all of what you said is true. But there's also the other aspect, which is, and again, I don't know the circumstances of these two dudes that approached me, whether they're being complete jerks from the start. But woman or man, if someone's approaching you in a friendly enough way and you are interested in having relationships with people, especially sexual relationships, if you close all those doors, it's not going to help you. Fine. Now, I'm not saying find them only in bars, right? That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But that's the thing. So in my case, if I were single and I wanted to get into a relationship, what I would do is, in addition to online stuff, I would probably try to meet people when I was out and about. And if someone pays me the time of day and then we decide to go on a date and it works well, then it might work, right? But if everyone's closing the door on me, then I'm not going to be able to do anything. And then likewise, if I'm closing the door to everyone, then it's also not going to work. Mm-hmm. So that's the only other side of this.
Yeah, right. So maybe I think you, Berto, are picking up on another angle to this email than I was. So thanks for talking about that. All right. Well, let's end with another OPP, Berto. What do you say?
OPP.
These people became patrons in 2021 and have stayed patrons ever since. All these folks did not list where they were from. So these are all people from God knows where.
What?
And
wow.
It's going to be a long list because there's a lot of them. We have Natalie, Nick, Jessica, Heather, Agni, Laura, Daisy, Sarah, Lindsay, Caitlin, Chris, Ellen, Orphea, Marie. Is this a Hispanic name? Mariali. Mariali.
Could be.
Mary, Simone, Ilsa, Johannes or Johannes, Miriam, Willa, Susan, Andrea, Danielle, Jay, Camille, Carolina, Traveling Otter, Nan, Alyssa, Lisa, Maho, Vivian, Bethan, Lauren, Sarah, Tina, Fi, Alicia, and also a middle tier patron, Anita, and middle tier patron, Jamie. Thank you for being a patron and staying a patron through thick and thin. Woohoo! And also, it's totally fine that you didn't tell us where you live because that's your prerogative.
It's your prerogative.
I always think of that when I think of that. That was, what's his face, right?
Is Bobby Brown?
Bobby Brown, yeah. Right? Yeah.
Isn't he an abusive person?
Was he?
Wasn't he or am I thinking of someone else?
I don't know.
Wasn't Bobby with Whitney Houston or something?
Let me ask ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Was Bobby Brown abusive? Question mark. He has faced allegations and accusations of abusive behavior, particularly in the context of his tumultuous relationship with his ex-wife, Whitney Houston.
Uh-huh.
Well, computers are never wrong, Berto. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.